All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode here. I've got a special interview that I've talked about doing here last week. I think is when I had first mentioned it. We're going to go ahead and launch this thing off, and I'm going to mention a couple show notes. First of all, we got some off-season stuff to look forward to now that the NFL draft is over with. We have OTAs that are going to be coming up, and obviously mini camps that's going to be coming up, so a lot of information to be held as far as that is concerned with some of our off-season. It's going to be all kinds of stuff going on in this off-season. There's always some sort of hoopla that the media likes to conjure up, and of course, a lot of us that are doing YouTube videos are probably going to be talking about those things. So look forward to some of that content. Some of that's going to be stuff that I try to tackle this off-season. Also, I have a mini-series that's going to be coming out dealing with the NFL draft from my perspective. I have already filmed 2 episodes for that. I'm going to be uploading those periodically throughout the off-season, probably about a week or 2 apart after I get done with editing and all that stuff. So look forward to those things coming up on the BFG show. Now, moving on to the interview that we are going to be conducting here today, I have Amir. Amir is a blog writer from Hail to the Redskins 559 at WordPress.com. He has conducted a couple other interviews with some other Redskin vid makers out there. If you haven't seen that stuff, go on to B Militant's channel on Redskins Review. There's an interview that he had done with him, and there's also one with Sanchez 405 over on the Warpath on YouTube. So go ahead and check those 2 out. And today is going to be my opportunity. I believe I'm his 3rd interview as a Redskins fan that he's going to have online, and definitely go over and check him out at Hail to the Redskins 559 at WordPress.com. He's got some really interesting articles up there. So without further ado, Amir, we can get this thing off the road, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, BFG. Thank you for asking. How about yourself?
I'm not doing too bad. I'm not doing too bad, man. I still got my health, and we still have our beloved Redskins, don't we?
Yes, we do.
All right, so let's kick this thing off. What do we got here?
Let's see here. All right. So, general questions I usually ask most Redskins fans. How long have you been a Redskins fan?
How long have I been a Redskins fan? Honestly, I think I'm going to have to go with just the regular general old answer to this one. I've been a Redskins fan my whole life. I have absolutely no reason to be a Redskins fan. If there's probably a unique portion of my answer is the fact that I don't come from the East Coast. I was, the first time I ever made it to the East Coast, I was in the 8th grade. But I'm from the West Coast. I hail from Washington State. I was a Redskins fan back when I was a kid. The first Super Bowl I saw us play in was against the LA Raiders when they kicked the crap out of us. And as a kid, I was a kid when that game took place, and I've always kind of been a guy that rooted for the underdog. And I remember the media coverage of that football game, and everything was so. The LA Raiders were just so much more dynamic than the Washington Redskins back then. And they had just a much colorful team. They had a very colorful, the coach was rather bland, but he was in charge of some rather colorful individuals. You had a lot of celebrities that were attached to that team when they'd first moved to LA. They had a great running back, a lot of bullet points to hit with that LA Raider team. Unfortunately, the Washington Redskins were about as plain as you could get. And we didn't have a dynamic coach. Our owner was old and crotchety and didn't like to be interviewed. And so everything back then was a very, very pro Redskins, or a very pro Raiders Super Bowl, even before the kickoff had taken place. And I remember I was upset as a kid because I wanted to see more of the Washington Redskins because I thought that I loved the uniforms, I loved the helmets, especially the helmets. And I just got sick and tired of hearing about the LA Raiders, and I got upset at the Raiders, and I wanted us to win, and the Raiders ended up kicking the crap out of us, and I was that kid thinking to myself, well, we're going to come back next year, and we're going to win, and we're going to show everybody. And I think what sunk the hooks into me the deepest is I was in the 8th grade in '87 when we won against Denver, and that was when It was the Redskins or bust. I mean, I never really rooted for another team anyway, but that was when I was at the point where I was willing to be a West Coast Redskins fan, wearing hats, wearing T-shirts, jerseys, and not caring about what anybody around here had to say. Because we had a lot of Niner fans here back then. We had a lot of Cowboy fans here back then, and we definitely had a good, healthy share of Seahawk fans here back then. Not a lot of Redskin fans. That was me and maybe a handful of other guys were about it. So we're kind of Deep Space Nine out here, where we're holding up the front way out in the middle of nowhere.
So, just a little follow-up is that you mentioned that the coach wasn't that dynamic. So you're talking about Joe Gibbs, right?
Yes, yes. Yeah, Joe, I mean, just from my memory, my recollection, Joe was not a guy who had outlandish things to say. He always had positive things to say about the other team, no matter who they were. He always had positive things to say about the opponent, about the opponent's coaches, their staff, regardless of how jaded or how colorful they were. He just was not somebody who had a lot of bad things. The only thing that I remember that really comes to my mind about Joe Gibbs having something adverse to say was probably Joe Gibbs 2.0 when he came back to coach for us again. And he mentioned on a fan day, he made fun of one of the Cowboy fans, or made fun of Cowboy fans in particular, and it blew up. And I think part of the reason why it blew up so much is because that's so out of character for him. And it was a huge deal. And I think that if he would have been a much more dynamic coach and a much more, I didn't say dynamic, but if he had a much more colorful coach who was, known for making outlandish statements, I don't think that would have been that big of a deal. But the fact it was Joe Gibbs, it's like, whoa, I mean, you already said about those Cowboy fans? That was very, very unlike him. He was a guy of high class. He had high morals, and he expected the best out of you. And that's not what a lot of people in the press want. That's not print-worthy. That's not sexy enough, in the NFL back then and even the NFL today. So the Raiders just had a lot more going. They had a lot more food for the masses just based on some of the outlandish stuff that they did, at least my opinion on it.
So what got you into YouTubing?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Trying to give you a bit of the short version here. Back when Joe Gibbs had come back and he was building a playoff-worthy team for us, we had gone back to we had gone to the playoffs twice. And back in those days, I had just YouTube was still kind of a new thing. I was just kind of learning my way around it a little bit, and I was really into video games at the time. I was really into playing these MMOs where you just sit on your ass and it's a major time sink where you got to do stuff every single day and you just got to grind out for hours and hours. And when I would do that, I had at the time I had a dual screen monitor system set up. I've got 3 now, but I had dual monitor systems set up to where one screen I was playing my game and on the other one I would be listening to highlight videos, because that was the hype back then for Redskin fans. We were going to the playoffs. In fact, we even won a playoff game against Tampa. And with dynamic guys on that football team like the Clinton Portises, the Santana Mosses, and the Chris Coolies and the Sean Taylors, a lot of people were putting out some really, really good highlight reel content. And then I stumbled on the TTC, and I had no idea what this TTC stuff was about. So I really got into following the old BFG crowd, and I started subscribing to a lot of their channels. And it got to the point where I was really looking forward to their videos. I mean, every week I was hoping these guys would come out with videos. And I was a really big fan of guys like 42 Torch and Mike and Ike and Skintastic Man and Psychopath BNG. And all of a sudden, after a year or two of doing that, they just stopped. Psycho was the only one that continued to do videos, but everybody just stopped, like at the same time. All of a sudden, I mean, Skintastic Man, I think, went on for a couple more months, but then all of a sudden he stopped. And I'm pretty sure there were a lot of fans out there who were like, where are these guys, man? Where's this content? They need to continue doing this, but they all just kind of went their own direction and did their own thing. And I remember telling myself, I was like, if you want somebody to put out good content, if you want somebody to start making videos, maybe you should just start doing it yourself. Become a part of the solution instead of part of the problem. And at the time, I was working revolving shift rotations at 12 hours, a pop, and a lot of mundane activity. So I had a lot of time to really think about how I was going to put it together. And that was ultimately what got me started. It was the 2012 season when Griffin got drafted. I already had an idea for the intro to my show and the theme music and how I was going to edit it and the stuff I was borrowing. I borrowed a lot from the video game community, to tell you the truth. If you want to be up to date on what's new, that's a good genre to follow, because those guys are usually pretty cutting edge anyway. So that was pretty much my start. Was I just, I grabbed my old webcam that I wasn't using anymore. I grabbed my headset that I was playing video games with, and I just hit record and listen, I'm going to talk about something. And I think one of the first guys I met when I first got started was Louis T, and that was when I got kind of thrust into the mainstream of being a Redskins vidmaker.
Right on. So you basically stepped up to the plate when nobody else would.
Yeah, pretty much. At least the guys that I was interested in watching.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's pretty cool. Are you happy with the results of the draft?
I'm very happy with the results of the draft. I think that the first round draft selection is something that comes around probably once every 10 or 15 years. To have a guy of that caliber drop that low, and I had a really, really good feeling when I saw teams mortgaging their futures on quarterbacks. I haven't really come out with too much. I mean, I've never really delved too much in the college aspects of things and put a lot of time into scouting talent at the college level. I did actually scout two. I scouted two quarterbacks this offseason. I watched probably about 3 or 4 games in their entirety between the two of them. One was that kid out of Notre Dame, and the other one was Mitchell Trubisky. And I was not very high on Mitchell Trubisky. I gave him a draft rating of about a 4th round draft pick. That's about as high as 3rd round or 4th round. That's about as high as I was willing to go on a Mitchell Trubisky. I had a lot of negative things to say about him that I didn't necessarily think would fit in a traditional NFL-style offense, but I was surprised when the Bears did what they did, and when all of a sudden these quarterbacks started dropping, I'm thinking, if you've got these quarterbacks that are moving up in the top of the draft, and these guys who are at the top of the draft are going to start sliding down. And you're looking at that Jonathan Allen name, and you're like, hey, man, he's getting close, but I'm not sure if he's going to fall to us. And then, bam, when he lands in our lap, unfortunately, if you've been a Redskins fan long enough, you know that the opportunity to screw that up is still very, very high. So I was really, I think all of us kind of breathed a collective sigh of relief, if not cheered a little bit, when the commissioner came out and announced his name in the 1st round. But I was really happy to see that we had drafted defense as opposed to going out and getting a bunch of offensive weapons like some of us wanted. I think we've needed a lot of help there. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be able to produce that talent, but it's nice to see that we have a little bit of a devotion to the defensive side of the football. The 2 kids out of Alabama, of course, I'm really looking for some high performance out of them. The cornerbacks, I actually like the tight end pick, to tell you the truth. I think we needed a blocking tight end. We haven't really been high on some of the blocking tight ends on this team for a couple of years now. I just think it's been out of convenience that we've kept them this long. So we got some youth as far as the blocking tight end portion goes. I don't know about the center in the 6th pick. We'll see. He's obviously got a lot of room to grow. But I was actually really, really happy with the draft.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I was very happy too. And the collective sigh of when they actually did read Jonathan Allen's name versus the rageful scream where they were going to read like Deshaun Kaiser because it's the Redskins. That's all I got to say about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I completely agree. There's no way. There's no way. I thought, well, what if he gets taken over? There's still Malik Hooker.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do like the blocking tight end as well. I did read somewhere on Bleacher Report that the center, who can also be a guard, I guess, was one of the steals of the 6th round.
Okay.
Same thing with the defensive back, the safety on the
Mante Nicholson out of Michigan State.
No, the one in the 7th round. Not Josh
Clemens.
Halsey, the other Josh.
Josh Harvey Clemens out of Louisville.
Yeah, Harvey Clemens. They're calling him a steal of the 7th round as well. So the way our draft went is pretty great, and go a little out of order here. So the way this draft went, it was a Scott McClellan-less draft. And 2014 was also a Scott McClellan draft. It was before he was even hired. And that was Bruce Allen's draft, just like how this was a Bruce Allen draft. 2014, this turned out to be a good draft class. It took a couple of years of development, but Trevor Murphy got up there. Spencer Long is now a starting center. Morgan Moses is now the 2nd highest paid right tackle in the league. Rashad Breeland is a good number 2 corner, all from the 2014 draft class. Do you think that the enigma around Bruce Allen, that he can't draft, is a false pretense because of the way these players have developed and the way this draft just so happened to go seemingly perfect for us with getting the players that we needed and also getting players to develop into different projects as well. So, because remembering from 2010 to 2013, that was all Mike Shanahan.
Yeah.
He was in charge of player personnel, other than the RG3 trade.
Yeah.
Which, that's a big blemish on Bruce Allen's record. I agree.
Yeah.
But what is your opinion on that? Do you think people are wrong about Bruce?
You know, I don't know. I think that first of all, before I get into the depths of that answer, I think that it's worth a big congratulations to Morgan Moses for getting his extension. That was something
Absolutely.
that when people were talking about cap space, when people were talking about how much money we had going into this season, I had actually put out a video mentioning something about, well, we need to start shoring up some of these guys that are going to be coming up for contract next year. And Ty Nsekhe was definitely one of those guys that we had to do this year. And then Morgan Moses was coming up next year. And it's like, let's shore these guys up now. This is how the big boys do it, is they sign these guys up, not necessarily waiting until their contracts are over with. But obviously Morgan Moses is a huge part of this offensive line. And I've been very, very impressed. And I've even highlighted some of the things that I've noticed that he's done in some of my reviews of our games. So I do it. There's times when he, when he could do a lot better, but for the most part, he's actually a very, very good tackle. And I was really, really high on him when he came out of Virginia. But as far as the Bruce Allen situation goes, I think that there's an argument for. I've never been high on the fact of. I've never been high on the idea that Bruce Allen is a talent evaluator. I don't think he's a talent evaluator at all. I think that his strengths are at player contracts. His strengths are being able to figure out cap space and being able to work with our money guy. I can't remember what that dude's name is, but being able to work on freeing up cap space and being able to get us into intelligent signings and being able to get us out of bad ones. Because when Bruce Allen came into this football team, we were in really, really bad shape as far as contracts were concerned. So he came in and shored a lot of that up. But as far as a talent evaluator, I don't consider him to be a very good talent evaluator. But I think if he's intelligent enough to use the people that's around him, I'm not necessarily going to be willing to say that he has hit home on guys like Spencer Long and Trent Murphy and and guys like that, because I don't want to sit here and say that Bruce Allen saw Spencer Long coming a mile away. I think Spencer Long was a backup that just happened to step up and rise to the occasion when we really, really needed him, because that really had that didn't have to work, but it did. I mean, the kudos goes to Spencer Long, to tell you the truth, to jump into a center position that was held by a veteran on this football team, to be able to come in and actually hold the line. There are people that came out and bashed Spencer Long for doing a horrible job, and I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, first of all, that center position is so unique to any other position on the offensive line. You just don't come in and play it, and then it's easy. It's a very difficult position, especially at the pro level. And he came in and took on double teams that not a lot of guys could do. So would I give Bruce Allen credit for doing that? Not necessarily, because I don't think Spencer Long was scouted as a center. He was scouted as I think, he was a backup tackle for us and kind of played a little bit of guard. So I think center was like the last thing we were looking at throwing him in. The Brashad Breeland thing, I think that, there were people that kind of told him this is a gem that we could take that's young. He's early. He's still had a couple years left in college, if I'm not mistaken, but he's projected to be a number one next year or the year after. So I think that right now we've got a pretty decent talent evaluation process behind us, and hopefully he's, obviously he's kind of listening to that. But I'm going to give it another year here. I'm going to give it another year to see if we hire another GM, and I'm going to give it another year because there's still a healthy argument for this being Scott McGloin's draft board. So I'll give it another year and see how well we're able to draft next year. And in my opinion, our drafts that go well are ones that address our needs, especially in the later rounds. So we'll see.
It's fair. Alrighty here. So I've noticed in some of your videos here, Um, Describing yourself, what would you consider yourself more of? An optimist, a realist, a daydreamer, or a pessimist?
Ah, if I was to describe myself, and I don't necessarily know how other people would describe me, but actually, I've been told. I've been told that I'm one of the more tolerant Redskin fans that people have ever met. I'm not a big hoopla guy, you know.
You're
I'm
more
not a big.
tolerant?
I'm one of the most. I'm one of the more tolerant. In other words, when our team is playing well, I'm not that guy that's sticking a finger in your face, saying "I told you so" and your team
Oh,
sucks.
okay.
I am the last person to be doing that.
Yeah.
Always that guy when our team is doing really well and kicking ass. I'm always that guy that's going to come out and say, "Hey, we're doing really good right now, but we still have a lot of stuff to work on. We still got to work on this. We still got to work on that. We're far from perfect." I'm that guy, and maybe it's just growing up in that Joe Gibbs era. Because that was kind of how he was as well. Yes, we're doing well now, but there's it can turn on us at any minute, and we still got to work on a lot of things. So I would have to say, if I was to describe myself, I'd probably describe myself as probably a little bit of a realist. I'm not somebody who jumps on the winning bandwagon and starts talking about my first round draft selection, how he's going to dominate everybody. I'm definitely not that person. I don't know if I'm necessarily optimist. I think that Dan Snyder has sapped out the optimism in me. It's been 20 years with this guy, and it's mentally exhausting. I'm not necessarily a daydreamer. I think that the daydreaming days were when I was a lot younger. So I'm definitely not a daydreamer. But the pessimist portion, I got to tell you, I'm starting to lean a little bit more towards the pessimism, especially this last off season was really hard because I was all in on Scott McLuhan, to tell you the truth, and I wasn't happy with the way that situation went down. And of course, as time goes on, that situation is going to be farther and farther behind us. But it's just more the same old stuff with this regime. When you start to get into a direction that you feel like is good, and then all of a sudden, and then within a couple of weeks, we try to find ways to tear it all down. And that's, I think, where the pessimistic side of me is starting to kind of come out a little bit. But I honestly think, and this is my honest opinion, and I've never really voiced this before, but if you take a look at the number of subscriptions that I had on my channel, and even on my previous channel, I'm not one of those guys that's pushing 1,000 subscribers, and it's never really been something that's bothered me. I just come on and make the videos that I want to make. But it has been rather curious when I've seen other people that have started YouTube channels and are actually getting those subscriptions up. And I started thinking to myself, I was like, if I wanted to really start gaining subscriptions, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come out and just be the big cheerleader. We're going to dominate everybody. Our quarterback is going to throw for 5,000 yards. Our running back is going to run for 1,000 yards. Our coach is going to do this. Our rookies are all going to do that. And I think that that's what people want, especially Redskin fans want to hear. I don't really put out that kind of content. I try to take a look at things from a realistic standpoint and say, hey, before we get ahead of ourselves, we still haven't signed our quarterback. We still got a corner that likes to throw temper tantrums. Our owner's still up to his regular shenanigans, and I'm just kind of one of those guys that tries to point a lot of those things out, and I don't necessarily know if they're things that a lot of fans like to hear.
So you mean the truth?
Yeah, it's not that I try to rub people's faces in it, but I do get a little perturbed when some people kind of wave the banner, and it's just like, come on, man. I mean, okay, yes, I can see how you can predict that we're going to do that, but history and track records say otherwise, and I'm always going to be that guy to kind of call people out on it. So, yeah, I guess my version of the truth is what I like to tell.
Right on. I think that answers my follow-up question to that. So you take a different approach on how you see the team, and definitely appreciate that you see the team from a realistic standpoint and an objective standpoint, not just, oh yeah, we're going all the way this year, guys.
Yeah.
So speaking of actually, side question here, there's going to be 3 trips to the West Coast.
Am I what now?
Are you going to try to make it to any of the West Coast games this year?
I for a couple of years there, I had traveled around quite a bit and had been to a bunch of football games, not necessarily Redskin games. I'd been to a good handful, and I've been to the East Coast and have actually watched games in at FedEx Field a couple of times. And I think the very first Redskins game I went to was in Arizona back when they were playing in ASU Stadium, and I have been to a couple games in Seattle. The Seattle game was a game that I wasn't necessarily planning on going on, but there's a couple other Redskin fans that live in my town, and I've been friends with them for, 30, 35 years, and we've talked about going. And I think that the Seattle game is probably going to be, the way that things are shaping out now, I think that the Seattle game is going to be one that I am going to go to. The problem, though, and this is kind of the caveat, is always that elephant in the room when it comes to me and my friends going to a game in Seattle. Seattle's one of the worst experiences that you could ever have as a member of the opposing team's fans. I don't care what they tell you. Okay? I think that the few times...
That 12th man was real, huh?
Oh, man. It's, and I don't want to sit here and necessarily pick on Seattle Seahawks fans. It's the NFL fan, period. Because every single place that I've been to, you get... drunken adolescents that get together, and people who don't know how to hold their booze, that drink way, way too much to get, extremely carried out of hand, and they're very, very passionate about their team. Those are very, very toxic mixes that you can get together, especially in a crowd that, law enforcement and security has no hope in hell of being able to control if it gets out of hand. And I've seen some pretty interesting stuff go down in some of those stadiums, to the point now where you're starting to see people getting shot in parking lots and people stabbed. It doesn't surprise me, to tell you the truth, that some of this stuff goes down. And I think that I was at both Seattle games when they knocked us out of the playoffs, in the 2000s. I was at both those games. And both of those games that we went to, all of us went to those games. And I don't think there's ever been few times where I've been kind of afraid for my physical well-being, whether I was going to make it out or make it out alive, because it got pretty hairy. And let's just say, just because of those experiences, I vowed never to take my kids to an NFL game. That's, as far as I'm concerned, that's an adult experience. And some people, unless they can get that situation figured out, and it's nice to kind of see some of that passion, but my particular experience in Seattle has not necessarily been good as an opposing team's fan. And I'm stubborn enough to be that guy that's like, I'm not going to show up anonymous and secretly root for the Redskins. I can't do that. I have to wear something that's, that's Redskins related. So, when you're dealing with the Hawk fans, there's no, at least in Baltimore and Washington, those teams have other teams around them. There's a huge pool of teams to choose from that are generally within your vicinity. Seattle's the furthest you can get in the NFL. I mean, they're way the hell up in the Pacific Northwest, clear up in Seattle, and there's nobody around them. Not even in Canada. The closest teams to them is Denver and San Francisco. So they have the market on at least 3 states. And that's part of the reason why when you go to a Seahawk game, you see 80 to 90% Seahawk fans. I was at the 2 years ago, I was at Seahawks Stadium to watch their last game against the Rams. At that time, they were the St. Louis Rams. And St. Louis had beat them. And I was talking to my sister, who's a huge Seahawks fan. I said, I'm going to count how many Ram fans I see here today. I didn't make it into the double digits. That's how many Ram fans I saw. And that's going out into the promenade area. That's going out into Eatery. I saw probably 8 or 9 fans that were actually wearing visible, whether it's a cap, whether it's a jersey, whether it's a T-shirt. I mean, period. That was it. So I would say about 98% of the fans that were there were all Seahawks fans. And that was a game that they didn't have to win. They were already in the playoffs. So it's not fun going there as an opposing team's fan. And even though I would love to see the Redskins play, the venue is not a favorite of mine.
I don't blame you. So I'm kind of glad they're not playing in Oakland this year.
Mm-hmm.
Because Oakland's just a terrible, unfriendly place that you don't want to venture into.
Yeah. Well, I will say this. We'll say this about Oakland fans. The Oakland fans have something that they are going to get to look forward to. When they move to Vegas, it's going to be a lot harder for the drunken debauchery in the desert. I don't know what the weather was like in Oakland, but I can tell you, standing outside in line in the fall in Vegas.
It's very similar to San Francisco weather.
Is it?
It's right there on the bay. Yeah.
Okay.
That's why they call it when they play each other, Battle of the Bay.
Mm-hmm.
It's because it's literally like 10 minutes away from each other.
But it's not the desert. That's what I'm getting at. Is when he gets to like in the hundreds,
it's not dry heat. Yeah.
And when you're outside and it's you got to get some fluids in, and it can't always be alcohol. So I don't know. It's going to be a very interesting experience, I think, for some of those fans having to move from the Bay Area out into the desert to go watch their games.
Yeah, I agree. Let's see here. So on a recent podcast interview, when asked if Washington is where he wants to be, Kirk Cousins did reply with that he wants to be where he feels wanted. Mm-hmm. And then he spoke about the history of the team and the fact of why wouldn't I want to be here because such great history. Because of these new comments, because Cousins never really said that. Do you think a deal gets done by July 15th?
In my opinion, when Kirk Cousins was asked that question, he was asked in a media row event, and I think it wasn't at the Super Bowl when he got asked. He got asked a couple of times that questions.
No, it was actually in London. This most recent one.
Okay.
It was on a trip to London on behalf of the NFL. It was with an interview with MMQB.
Okay. And the MMQB is a very, very reputable, high-profile organization as far as reporting on sports media goes. So it's not like this is some secondary, bottom of the barrel, organization that's putting out this report. MMQB is pretty top notch in my opinion. I don't necessarily agree with everything it is they have to say, but with those comments, when it comes to those comments by Kirk Cousins, I think that those comments get looked at very differently by by people that look at the Kirk Cousins situation differently. I will admit, and I've admitted to this, and even other people have admitted to this, that I look at the Kirk Cousins situation from a different perspective. I am not one of these guys that really, really, really wants Kirk to sign, and there's no other avenue but for us to sign him, and if we don't sign him, then that equals just stupidity. We have to sign him. That's our measure of success. I've always come at it from a different perspective. Kirk has always been a guy who's been very, very good about speaking as a team player. He's not going to come out and put anybody down. He's not going to come out and say anything adverse. He's been very, very cautious of his situation. I don't think he's going to come out and say, he's never going to come out and say, hey, you know what, this team needs to sign me. If they don't sign me, they need to let me go. Or he's not going to say something, stupid like that. I see his comments being, I see him going in one direction, I see him going in another. To me, when he says that that he would like to be here, there's a portion of me that believes that thinks that he does want to be here. And why wouldn't he want to be? He fits into the John Gruden system. He's a very good quarterback in that John Gruden system. He can also run the read option system if he wants to, because he had to when he played behind Robert Griffin III. And there are some teams out there that are running that kind of run that from time to time. So he can fit into that system too. He's proved his versatility. But when it comes to that short 3-step, 4-step drop, bang, throw your ball, he's very, very good at that. And part of the reasons why he takes so few sacks and has few fumbles is because of that process. And I think that he can grow with our head coach. Unfortunately, the higher ups in this organization don't. I don't think he's sexy enough for them. And I think that when he comes out and also says, I just want to play, where I'm wanted. I think that's to me, the way I take a look at that, it's like, look, if you're not going to sign me, I want to be somewhere and play for a team that is. I want to play for a team that's going to pay me what I'm worth. And as Washington, as an organization, we couldn't have screwed this up even more. I mean, I can't think of any other way that we could have screwed this up. With the 2 franchise tags that we've slapped on this kid, we have set the market on his value. And it's hard because when his agent comes out and says, "Look, there was a $19 million contract on the table for almost a year, and nobody gave us a phone call." And as a fan, I'm standing with my hands in the air, going, "Are you kidding? Why would you not take that? Why would you not take a $19 million deal? Why would you wait until you slap a $24 million franchise tag on him and then try to negotiate? That doesn't make any sense. Why would you drive the product up?" Or the demand of that product up so you can cost you more money. I don't know of anybody that does that. And yet we've done that. And right now, the basement for negotiating a Kirk Cousins contract is probably $24 million. And to me, as a fan, $24 million is a lot of money. I would love to see Kirk back, and I would love to see him flourish in this offense. And I think we could go places with him. I just don't want to do it when we're cash strapping ourselves into a quarterback that hasn't won a playoff game yet. So it's kind of a give and take. If we signed him tomorrow, I would be happy. I wouldn't be necessarily happy with the contract, but hey, you know what? Forget about the contract. Forget about the money. Let's go play football. Let's go win some games. I would try to be that guy. But the more that things have taken place, the more it's shown me that I don't know if I necessarily see Kirk Cousins on this team after July 15th, because we could have been doing this at any point in time. I was worried about the draft. And when that rumor came out we were going to trade him, I was like, okay, this is the reason why we haven't signed him, because we're looking at offloading Kirk Cousins for some draft picks. Well, that never happened. Mm-hmm. So now I'm really confused. Well, then what are we doing? We're waiting until July 14th to pay $24 million? So what? I don't know. The one thing I can tell you about this team is when you think you have them figured out, man, they throw you for a loop.
I agree there. I do know there was reports coming from their draft room. I believe Jason Lockton4 reported this. That when I think Eric Schaefer, the guys in charge of the contracts, their lead negotiator, said someone's on the phone from the Browns about trading Cousins or wanting to trade for Cousins. There's a collective gigantic laugh from Dan Snyder, Bruce Allen, and Jay Gruden, and told them to hang up.
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, that kind of gives me a little bit of...
There's so many political answers from both sides.
There is.
It's Washington, D.C., the town of politics.
Yeah. And that's completely our fault, too, by the way. It doesn't have to be that way, and that's the way that we've insisted on conducting business. That's been... And I go back to the Shanahan era with the leaked news reports and the I don't know what, I forget what you call it, the anonymous tip, what do they call that when somebody doesn't want to be pointed out, that the Post is always referring. I can't necessarily remember the terminology on that, but
I think anonymous tip is correct.
Yeah, but that's pretty much it. When you have an anonymous person who will not be named, is leaking this.
Source.
Yeah, exactly. And that was, even during the Robert Griffin III era, that was happening every single week. Right before kickoff, it was happening. And everybody knew it was coming from, somebody within Redskins camp, somebody that was higher up, and everybody suspected it was Shanahan, and everybody suspected it was Allen. I'm willing to think it was both. But this is just the games that we play, and especially when you take a look at the Scott McLuhan situation, when we went on a smear campaign about him, that was something we didn't have to do. We could have just come out and said, hey, he was a great guy. It wasn't necessarily working out. We wish him the best, and, we're moving forward. But no, we couldn't do that, could we? No, the guy's a drinker. He's a heavy drinker. He's a cursor, and he likes to talk to our players, and we don't like that here in Washington. I mean, come on. But, yeah, it's. I think that a big part of this is just, us being us.
After the draft, who do you think is the best team in the NFC East currently?
Oh, well... Unfortunately,
going based off
the draft,
based off of hype. Yeah, going based off of hype of how these players should play.
Okay.
Not obviously we don't know how they're going to play, but Jonathan Allen's supposed to be the best player in the draft.
Yeah.
Ryan Anderson was supposed to be a really good player.
Yeah.
So on and so forth. Based off of that, who do you think's based off the hype? Who do you think's the best team in the East?
I was actually surprised to see that Dallas went in the direction that they did. I knew that they were going to go after an edge rusher, which is exactly pretty much what they did in the first round. But I was surprised that they had this devotion to the defensive side of the football. I think that if, just based on that hype alone, if they get a majority of those guys to hit, they're going to be a much stronger team with the youth that they picked up this year. That offense is still really, really very, very good, and isn't really showing any signs of slowing down. They need to start looking at wide receiver, which is probably part of the reason why they went with a couple wide receivers in this draft, because they're looking at losing Dez probably. taking a look at the Giants have always been an extremely hard team for me to evaluate. And part of the reason I think why is because, they play their cards very close to their chest. As far as their needs go, they went with a quarterback in the third round, which I think is smart because Eli Manning's got a couple more years left in him before he's going to start hanging up his hat. So you got to start looking for a replacement for him. I think they're going to be fairly good. The Eagles, I think, drafted fairly well. I'm surprised a lot of them were upset about the Derek Barnett selection. I think a lot of hype right now on that Derek Barnett situation. You cannot talk about Derek Barnett without somebody bringing up the Reggie White record. Look, let's stop comparing Derek Barnett to Reggie White before he's even taken a snap in the NFL yet. Okay, moving from Tennessee, because that was the thing about Tennessee. About Derek Barnett, I had evaluated him a little bit. Derek Barnett was not the only defensive lineman on that football team that was awesome. He had a couple other individuals that were next to him who were very, very good also that I think helped accentuate his highlight reel a little bit. So we'll see on how he does at the next level. I think there's a lot of hype behind him. But to tell you the truth, as far as drafting need, I would have to say, unfortunately, Dallas is up there. I think we're up there, to tell you the truth, because we really needed a lot of help on defense. We still have a lot of holes left, but I really would have liked to have seen us gone inside linebacker as well, but we didn't get that done this year. But that's okay. I don't think we would have made it out of this offseason without one of those positions not getting addressed. So I would have to say, unfortunately, if I was to pick one team, it would have to probably be Dallas right now, only because their offense is already very, very well established, and all they really needed to do was focus pretty much on special teams and defense.
So I myself have been thinking about getting into YouTubing/vlogging versus keeping up with this print stuff, because it's easier for me just to pull my phone out and turn my camera on, upload to YouTube, versus having to sit down on my computer for 3 hours while I type out a story.
Yeah.
And also making sure, I'm getting correct information and not just spewing out stupid rumors. What kind of advice do you have for people starting up like that?
For people who want to get into YouTubing? Mm-hmm. My advice, that's a really, really good question, and that's that is at the very, very heart of my one-on-one series. There was a point in time in my video making process in the very early stages of it. And I have to say, one of the biggest inspirations for that has been Louis T's channel. For those of us that have been following Louis T long enough, we've seen the progression of his channel and how far he's branched out. It's been very impressive to watch, and I think that for some of these, I follow a lot of different genres, a lot of different subjects on YouTube, and there's some really, really good vid makers that are out there. But there's always that question that goes on in my mind, man, it's great what you got going on, but how did you get started? What made you want to do this? And that, like I said, has been at the very heart of my one-on-one series. I wanted to grab some of who I would consider inspirations to me and sit them down in an interview just like this one and say, hey, how did you become a fan? How long have you been a fan? What made you get into YouTube? What made you get started? What equipment do you use? What would you tell somebody that's aspiring to be a YouTuber? How would you tell them, to get started? What would you tell them that they could look forward to, the highs and the lows? Every single one of those episodes, I think I've got about 6 or 7 of those episodes, and I've got feelers out to do a couple more this off season. But I ask all those questions of all of them. And all of them have fairly similar answers, but then some of them have very unique answers. So if you are looking to getting into YouTubing and you're not quite sure exactly how to go about it, where you draw your inspiration from, what it is you're going to need, what it is that you think you can expect but aren't quite sure, that's a good source to go to. First, subscribe to my channel, but go into my playlist section and go into the one-on-one series and look some of those up. I've interviewed probably 4 or 5 Redskin fans. 4 of them have been Redskin vid makers, and that was kind of how I got started. And then I branched off and got guys like Big Q, and I ended up hitting Mikey Raider, that was a Raider fan, and I've got feelers out to do a couple other people that aren't necessarily associated with the Washington Redskins, but if you're looking at getting into that, I would say definitely hit up that series and watch those interviews. And there's some nuggets in each one of those. And guys like Psychopath BNG, who was a phenomenal interview for me, that was a huge undertaking on my part because he's been a huge inspiration to what it is I do on the BFG show. Just listening to how he became a fan, the area that he grew up in, and how he got started, and he's a personality in and of himself. It's kind of interesting to see that. And you don't necessarily need to be a big top flight production guy like Big Q and have all these bells and whistles and lights and effects. You could be just a guy who picks up a phone, and just slaps a video online and talks about what it is you want to talk about. You can do it from your car. You can do it from a public place or your house. So there's a lot of different things I think you can pick up from that series if you're looking at getting started out.
Well, some very sound advice. Thank you. Who is your current favorite player on the Redskins? And also, who is probably your favorite player of all time from the team?
Wow. My current favorite player. That's a hard one for me to answer right now because one of my current favorite players used to be Pierre Garçon. I was a huge fan of his, and I'm a fan of a lot of different people on the football team, but Pierre Garçon was a guy who was a grinder, who did a lot of things that could not necessarily be captured on film that were advantageous to the progression of our offense. It wasn't just catching the football. And it was those intangibles that I think that helped this team out tremendously. But being that he's no longer on the football team and going with the current roster member, to tell you the truth, the guy that I probably have the utmost respect for out of anybody on this football team, and somebody that if I was on the team, I'd probably look up to tremendously, is probably Trent Williams. Trent Williams, I think, is a pillar on this football team. We've always had a pillar at left tackle. And I was worried when we picked him up because when we picked him up out of the draft, I was really, really big on that kid that ended up going to Seattle after we picked him. I can't remember, Okung. I was really big on Russell Okung, and that was a guy that I wanted at left tackle, and we ended up picking up this Trent Williams kid. Who the hell is Trent Williams? I've never heard of this guy. Is he any good? And then, of course, after the first year or two, it was like, okay, I'm starting to see it. And he's been a staple. He's one of those guys that you can just put in a game plan, and the coach doesn't have to worry about left tackle. He just has to worry about the rest. And that makes your job easier as a coach. It makes your job easier as a quarterback and as a running back. And he's got a lot of phenomenal physical talent as he's a tremendous athlete, very quick for a left tackle. So he's definitely one of those guys that I would have to say is probably one of my favorite players, that is probably one of the most respected team captains we have on this football team besides our quarterback.
And so that's correct. What about all-time favorite Redskin?
Oh, wow, my all-time favorite Redskin. My all-time favorite Redskin, the guy that I think that I look back and think of fondly, especially the days when this individual had played, somebody who really, really sparked my imagination and my pride for this football team, was probably Doug Williams. Doug Williams did it before anybody else, and what's amazing to me about Doug Williams is that Doug was like a lot of black quarterbacks of his era. I don't recall too many of these guys being very braggadocious. These guys were very humble. These guys were tremendous competitors, phenomenal athletes, and with as much as they had kind of gotten shunned at the time by the league as far as press goes, Doug went into that Super Bowl, and as much as the media wanted to concentrate on, him as a player, as him as an athlete, and as far as his ethnicity, Doug kept it pretty much about the team, kept it about the scheme, concentrating on going in and winning a football game. This has nothing to do with anything else. And I think that drew his team around him even closer, because I remember the Jay Schrader days. I hated Jay Schrader. Hated that dude. Could not stand that guy. And every time he went into the game, I would almost cry, because I hated that blonde-haired bastard so much. And then when Doug would go in, I was like, oh, thank God Doug is in. The team just played better around Doug, and you saw it. And I think that, just what he was able to accomplish just in that one game, but not only that season, he's probably my favorite Redskin of all time as far as who I never got a chance to see some of these golden oldie guys play, so I can't necessarily speak intelligent on them, but Doug Williams is a guy that I definitely have very fond memories of as a player.
Right now, I definitely have respect for that Doug Williams right there because, first African American quarterback to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah. And first MVP.
And first African American Super Bowl MVP.
Mm-hmm.
Just absolutely amazing what he did, not only for just to change the culture of football, but just for the Redskins himself. And there's definitely rumors that he'll be tapped to be the GM actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
So one final question here, a little bit away from the Redskins.
Okay.
You can go to a little bit northern of Washington D.C. To the snowy area of New England. And do you believe that Tom Brady is the GOAT of quarterbacks?
That's a great question. A great non-Redskins question. And what's interesting is that I used to have a guy on my channel, Naysayer. Some of you guys have been following me long enough. You guys have seen him on my show, and his wife is from the area, and she's a huge New England Patriots fan, so she's going to love this answer. Shout out to her. But Tom Brady, I think that I personally am. I'm not a big fan of Tom's, and it's nothing he's done in particular, to tell you the truth. I don't like the hype train. There's a lot of hype that comes associated with Tom Brady, and that's really not any his fault, because all he's trying to do is just go out and play a game, but I think that I know that in another 10 years, when he is retired and is no longer playing.
If he's retired.
Well, he says that. He's going to be retired. One of these young kids is going to knock him out of this game, or he's just going to end up hanging it up. I don't know which. But all I can tell you is that if I was him and my head coach decided to retire, I'd be right behind there. There's no way I'd play on a football team without that coach. No way. But when he's retired and gone, I think that we are probably going to look back at this era and say that he was probably the greatest to play. And if you take a look at some of the greatest who have played this sport, with the exception of a few, most of these guys have done it under a particular coach. They've done it with a particular team. They've done it with a particular receiver or running back. There have been staples that they have taken with them through different eras that have been able to help them proliferate. You got the Joe Montanas and the Jerry Rices, Tom Brady hasn't necessarily been that guy, with the exception of maybe Gronkowski. He's been one of those guys.
Still, Gronkowski's been out like these last couple of Super Bowls, though.
Exactly. He's done it without him. And some of the talent that they've put on this football team is talent that really couldn't necessarily do very well on other teams. You just, if you come in here and if you get your crap together and you do what it is we tell you to do, he's going to get you the football. And that's been phenomenal to me, that he's been able to plug in talent around him at every position and still come out and win and have a successful season, not necessarily where he's winning Super Bowls, but still have a successful season. And there's not I can't think of a quarterback that's really been able to do that on a consistent basis quite like Tom Brady. And it's not necessarily just Tom Brady. There's other factors around him as far as his head coach. His head coach is a great head coach, and the atmosphere that they have up there definitely helps. But you can't do it without the quarterback. And I think that as much as it's hard for me to admit now, but I know 10 years from now I'm going to say that Tom Brady was probably the best to do it. So I would have to say, yeah, I could definitely see Tom Brady having that moniker now.
Yeah, I've always been a little bit of a Tom Brady fan myself, which was because everyone loves to hate him.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same reason I grew up mildly a Lakers fan, is because everybody loved to hate Kobe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so somebody has to cheer for the villain sometimes.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And you know, to be honest with you, it's been really really hard, kind of shifting this back towards the Redskins. But you know, it's been really really hard as a fan going back as far as I have. For those of us that are older that remember the '80s, and even farther than that that remember the '70s, it's hard because there are generations of children out there, generations of young men that are growing up in an era of Washington football that the only memory that they have of a successful franchise is on highlight footage. You know, highlight footage from 20 years ago, 25, 30 years ago. And that's been extremely frustrating as a Redskins fan because you want to see, us have a winning mentality, us have a reputation for success. And it's hard to have success without sustained success. You got to have, and that's all my channel has really been preaching for the last couple of years, is just trying to have sustained success. I don't want to go to a playoff game and win and then sit at the bottom of the East for 2 years and maybe we'll get our shot again. I want sustained playoff appearances. I want a shot at a Super Bowl, and that, in my opinion, is how the best way to do it. But I always kind of look at some of the younger vid makers out there and younger guys that are fans of the Washington team. That to grow up in this era and to be fans in this era, we're not necessarily known for having that. I tip my hat to you guys because I remember the earlier days, and I can lean on that when times are bad. I don't know what these younger guys do. I don't know what they lean on.
It's something that we have to. I was 2 when they won their last Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So I'm one of those that's going on highlight reels. Then finally starting to get into them in the mid 2000s with the Santana Moss, Clinton Portis era with Taylor and everything.
Yep.
He rests in peace. One last Redskins question,
yeah.
and then I'll let you go because it's definitely understand late. From a marketing standpoint, I hate to do this as a marketing standpoint kind of question, but for the Redskins, would you agree that they should officially retire Taylor's number? Because Redskins don't usually they don't officially retire numbers, so everything's always unofficially retired.
Yeah.
And it is, 21 is an unofficially retired number that no one's worn it since that. Should one officially retire it, have a ceremony officially retiring it, and 2, every year around the time of his time of the anniversary of his death, have the Sean Taylor Memorial Game, as I like to kind of call it in my head, where they wear their honorary black jerseys as a color rush.
Mm-hmm.
They wear black jerseys with their normal helmets, and all with the instead of having like a captain's patch like they would have like our cousins would have, or like Trevor Williams would have. They have a 21 patch that's inside like of the Redskins helmet, what the Redskins logo would be. So, what do you think about that kind of thing?
So, are you saying that there's is there a Sean Taylor thing going on now? I mean, is there? I don't necessarily know this.
No, sorry to be confusing on the question.
Mm-hmm.
What was your feeling about that if they were to do that kind of thing? If they were to make a yearly Sean Taylor Memorial Game, and to also just to officially retire the number 21.
Mm-hmm. To be honest with you, I think that the honorary game, I think that would be a phenomenal thing to do. Have it as a fundraiser, and something to kind of pay homage to him as a player, and to to kind of remember him, but also have it, support, whether it's a local community or a community out of Miami, being that he was from Miami, and have it, I personally, I think that would be that's the first time I've ever really heard of anything like that, so I think it's a great idea, and it's probably, I think that's definitely something that should be taken into consideration. I would be behind that 100%. I think that would be great. As far as the retiring of the number, the Washington Redskins currently only have one official retired number in the franchise. Unfortunately, aside from that, we have a Ring of Fame, and I'm not necessarily speaking to you. I'm speaking to the audience per se, if they may not necessarily know.
Mm-hmm.
But we do have a Ring of Fame, and the Ring of Fame is pretty much people that we honor as Redskins players from the past, whose numbers that we tend to shy away from. They're not necessarily officially retired, and there have been players who have come in and have worn some of those numbers with the permission of certain people, whether it's the family, whether it's the representatives of the estate, what have you. That has happened, but the Sean Taylor situation is a unique one, and part of the thing that I think that is the most unique about it is that you're talking about a player. Bottom line, you're talking about a player whose body of work is nowhere near the body of work that some of these other players have that actually have their name. Actually, Sean Taylor's name is enshrined in the Ring of Fame, so that's notwithstanding. Mm-hmm. But his body of work is much, much smaller because, he didn't have that long of an NFL career before he was taken from us. We can speculate as to how much better he could have gotten or if he would have stayed the same or what have you. It's going to be really, really hard, I think, to say that Sean Taylor's number needs to be the second only number to be retired on such a short body of work when you've got guys like John Riggins and Art Monk and Joe Jacoby and Sonny Jurgensen. I mean, some of these guys that had long, extensive careers, as Washington Redskins players that have great, stats to go behind them. I can see the argument for retiring Sean's number, and I can see the argument for not retiring Sean's number. Me personally, I think where Sean is at right now in the Ring of Fame is I'm fine with that personally. And you're talking to one of the biggest Sean Taylor fans that I think that's around, only because I was, I played the position. I know the position well, and when he had played for us. I don't have and just to kind of iterate just a little bit here, I don't have a high opinion of rookies. I've never had a high opinion of rookies, and this comes back from my football days. But I do subscribe to the concept that, you're not really anybody until you actually go out on the field and prove it. Until then, you're just putting on a jersey and you're wearing a number that's going to be temporarily on you until we can either get some production out of you or find somebody else to take that number from you. And so I like the draft selections that we have, but man, you coming in as a rookie, you got a lot to prove. There's a huge step up from college to pro, and if you want to wear the burgundy and gold, I don't care if you're wearing blue and white. I don't care if you're wearing purple and black. I don't care if you're wearing neon and blue. We're talking about the burgundy and gold here. Those are sacred colors to us as Redskins fans. If you're going to wear those colors, you got to earn your place on that field. And until you've earned your place on that field, I don't know who the hell you are. I figured out who Sean Taylor was preseason. Before the season even started, I was like, whoa, this kid is good. And I have been a fan of his ever since. And I've been to 3 or 4 games where I went to see him play and really concentrate on him as a player and know just how phenomenal a talent he was and how much better he could have gotten. I personally am honored at the idea of him being in the Ring of Fame. If he doesn't go much farther than the Ring of Fame, then I would be fine because you're in a very, very high class of other individuals in the Ring of Fame. I think that if this is something that's going to happen, it's going to happen soon because the farther we get away from his passing and we start getting other players in here and genres start changing and these players that remember him are getting older, it's going to be harder to argue that. But I don't personally think that that's going to be a thing, only because, like I said, we've only had one jersey that's been retired. There's only been one guy to have that honor. And that has been something surprisingly, the huge shocker has been Dan Snyder. I have been shocked that Dan Snyder has upheld a tradition that he didn't start. For a guy who has the ability to have favorites and to showcase his favorites, I'm surprised he hasn't broken that seal. And that was something that wasn't started by him. That was something that was that came from a regime before him. So that's
was that from Jack Kent Cooke?
I believe that was from Jack Kent Cooke, and I think I want to say that the early days of the Sammy Baws and definitely the George Allens. I think George Allen had a big to do with that. That we don't want to get carried away with retiring numbers, and there was really one guy.
Who's the only retired numbers? Is it Baugh?
Yes. So he's the only person that has that actually has that moniker. And from what I understand, he was a phenomenal talent when we had him. For somebody to play both ways, I mean, that's that's a huge pat on the back. And there's not anybody else in that Ring of Fame that's been able to play at that high a level, both ways.
Yeah.
So as far as the Sean Taylor situation goes, I would like to see his number retired. I think it would be a good thing, but it doesn't it doesn't surprise me that we haven't retired his number, because there are a lot of players that I think that could also be given that nod if we're going to give it to Sean.
All right. Well, that is all the questions I have. Do you have any questions for me, BFG?
No. I think the only question that I have for you is you have mentioned in this interview that you were talking about going from print to video, and you were looking at uploading some videos on your own channel. How long has that been an aspiration of yours? And kind of give me a little bit of a history on that, on how you've been thinking about what started all that.
Well, I've always been kind of into video editing, everything like that. Just a little side hobby. I did what every angsty teenager would do, and do AMVs when they're in high school to their favorite TV show or movie or whatever. And I remember I actually had an AMV, my very first YouTube channel that no longer exists. Well, it's still there, but the AMV is no longer there because copyright stuff got stricter throughout the years. I had an AMV of the Star Wars lightsaber fight between Anakin and Obi-Wan from Revenge of the Sith, set to 30 seconds to Mars, the kill.
Okay.
And it got up into the upwards of almost 500,000 views.
Wow.
So just seeing that and seeing like, wow, okay, I can actually do something kind of fun with that.
Yeah.
But just kind of losing my way through the years of trying to find out what I want to do in life, and not necessarily making this my career per se, but it's something to do that I enjoy, that I need to get as an escape from real life problems. That's why I've been thinking about doing it, and that I enjoy the whole video editing process and seeing that final product come together. So I was very proud. I did the editing on mine and Sanchez 405's mock draft.
Yeah.
So I was very proud of that with the editing I was able to do there, and just working on that made me miss it. So that's why I'm thinking about getting back into it. And full as a Redskins YouTuber.
Yeah. That's cool, though. I think that the only one of the major drawbacks is as far as getting started on YouTube is you gotta maintain it. And if you're not able to maintain it, and obviously I don't necessarily how that affects your numbers, but it doesn't necessarily improve them or help them. I do not put out videos as often as I would like, because I've got a lot. I mean, everybody has life stuff that it comes up that gets in the way, and it's difficult. I admire people who have set days. Thursdays is this day, and Mondays is this day, and then and you're able to maintain that schedule. I don't have that luxury right now. I try to come out with videos as much and as often as I can, but I'm also not going to rush that process either. I try to maintain my own standard of quality. But I have to say that the biggest drawback to getting started with it that I can see so far, there are several, is one, you got to have thick skin, and two, you've got to be able to continually come out routinely with content. in order to keep that, your subscribers, happy, I guess you'd say. So other than that, man, if you got the time and if you have the love and the desire for it, it's actually kind of cool. I've been doing it for several years now, and I don't know how much longer I'm going to be doing it, but so far it's actually, I've actually enjoyed doing it. So I'd have to say, if you haven't, if you're aspiring to do it, I would say definitely give it a shot. Put yourself out there and see what happens.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Fantastic talking to you, sir.
You too, man. You too. This has been great.
Taking the time out of your schedule to talk to me and going on to the interview. Hopefully, maybe we can do a before the season starts. We can talk about training camp or something, or do maybe a collaboration with franchise or something like that. It'd be fun.
Yeah, that'd be excellent.
So it's good to get group thing going off. Maybe do a whole debate about the schedule itself. Let's see. Let's take a really good look at these games and say, all right, this is why they're going to win this. Why?
Yeah. Yeah, sounds good, man. This has been a good process.
Definitely. So I will leave it to you to sign off.
All right, man. We'll catch you later.